I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know. Who am I kidding? I grew up in Georgia. I know nothing about white Christmas. You know what I'm saying? I know nothing about white Christmas. We have no dreams. They have been crushed every year. All of our white Christmas dreams down the toilet. That's the only thing I envy about you Yankees. Yankees, by the way, are people who come. Okay. We got a few of you here, okay? Yeah, be careful. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? These white Christmases. I think the problem is we got to be more specific, because I feel like that God should answer our prayers every once in a while. Instead of dreaming, maybe we should be, I'm praying for a while. You know what I'm talking about? We should change that. But I think we need to be specific. And when I say specific, I mean what I want is Jesus. This is what I need. I need, like, on the eve of Christmas Eve, after our Christmas Eve gatherings are finished, by the way, and we have all loaded out, and we are home. And then I need, like, Blizzard of 93 White Christmas. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Anybody here? For those of you who don't know, you missed out. I don't know what you were doing. I don't know where you were born, but you weren't here. You know what I'm talking about? Experiencing the greatest moment in Georgia history. You know, let me tell you, that's what I want on Christmas Day. To make sure you understand, I grew up closer to the snow line. I grew up just south of the actual city of Atlanta, a place called Hapeville. And there we get a whoop, come on. I grew up on a street, has a new name now because they think if they change the street name, it changes what happens on the street. They're wrong. Called Stewart Avenue. And yeah, that's right. I know. So I grew up right off that street. And technically it was a little spur, like Stewart Avenue ran this way and our house was right there. So my backyard was Stewart Avenue. And so 3187 Jackson Street, and you can look that house up if you'd like to on the Google Maps, and you can still see it. It's an address I will never forget for the rest of my life. Have so many childhood memories in that place. There are 4 boys. We were in bunk beds in a little room. It was like 12 by 12, and so the bunk beds were next to each other. We had this tiny little square that the door opened into to play in the floor, and so we just went back, and it was fantastic. Anyway, there's one particular moment where in Blizzard of 93, that we lost power, but we had a gas stove, no power, that kind of thing. My father needed to heat some water because he let us go outside and play. And we played. But we didn't have no snow stuff. I had jeans, and so I put some sweatpants on and jeans because that makes it better. It doesn't. But I put sweatpants on and jeans because that's going to make me warm. And then I have gloves, so I put socks on. Socks don't work either, by the way, for gloves. I mean, they work until you put your hands in the snow, and then they stop working. You know what I'm talking about? And so that's what I was doing. So when we came inside, we didn't have no hot water. And so my dad boiled water. He had pots on the stove and all of them were boiling. And so he put us in a bathtub and poured the boiling water into the cold, freezing water. And then we had a lukewarm bath. I don't want all that nastiness to come with it, but I want the snow. I want to keep my power. I want my kids to play outside. I might boil some water just to be a little nostalgic, you know what I'm saying? Just to see what scalding feels like, on their legs. That's fine. But that's what I want. That's what I want. You know what I'm talking about? That's what I want in a white Christmas. Expectations and Christmas seem to go hand in hand. That we have these idealized versions of this is what Christmas is supposed to be. Publix does a great job at reminding us what Christmas should look like, right? And they give us these commercials, and all of a sudden we're watching it. It's like, why am I crying? It's a Publix commercial. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if y'all seen the new Chevrolet commercial. It's a long commercial. It's about a grandmother who's got dementia or Alzheimer's, and it's this pretty late stage. And you should go Google that one. I was going to show it, but that's the whole message. You know what I'm saying today? It's like 6 minutes. It's one of the greatest commercials ever created. It was really good. So we have these ideas of this is what Christmas is supposed to be. This is what Christmas is supposed to look like. And so we have these expectations, we have these hopes, and we have these dreams, and we have these visions of sugar plum fairies that are dancing in our head. We have these things. But Christmas a lot of times doesn't turn out that way, does it? Christmas and expectations being shattered are actually not all that new. Now, he didn't know that Christmas was headed his way, but certainly his expectations were shattered. There's a man named Joseph. Joseph grew up in a devout Jewish family, one that really prided themselves on saying, you know what, we're going to submit our complete lives to the will of God. And we're going to raise our children in a way where they begin to desire and want to submit their lives to the will of God. And so Joseph grew up in that world. He had a little business. He was a carpenter. And typically those types of businesses kind of are handed down from one generation to another. He was doing everything the right way. He had this girl that he was super interested in. Her name was Mary. And he had entered into a marriage commitment with her. Our term would be engaged, but our term falls a little short. In the first century Jewish household, when you decided you wanted to get married to someone, you technically were in a covenant from the very beginning, from the engagement. The only thing that hadn't happened yet is there hadn't been an official ceremony and the marriage hadn't been consummated, which is a fancy word to say they hadn't had sex yet, right? So that's what was happening. And so there was this process in between, but the commitment was still there, and it was still binding, and it was still exactly what they eventually would be in terms of their commitment to one another for forever. So everything was going along just fine. They lived in a town called Nazareth. Nazareth in the first century, to give you a little bit of just to kind of visualize it, the city of Nazareth in the first century sat and completely encompassed about 60 acres of land. That's it. 60 acres, that's the entire town. The population of the town of Nazareth in the first century was 480 people. 480 folks, 60 acres of land. So when you think small town, when you think a place where everybody knows everybody, when you think through, you know what, most people probably had some furniture that Joseph's dad had built them in their house as a carpenter. Like, people probably recognized the handiwork. Like, you know what, that looks like something Joseph would have made. There's no telling how many people watched Joseph and Mary grow up together. I don't know who the old woman or the old man at some point was like, I see something special in those two, right? Like, I've seen this coming for a long time, I don't know where y'all been, but I knew this was going to happen, when their engagement's announced. That's the world that Joseph is growing up in. And that's his big expectation world. Let me do the right things the way that God has instructed us to. Let me follow through on those things. Let me be obedient to who God has called my family to and to me. And I want to continue what was started in me with my parents. I want to see that on, and I want to have my own children. I want to pass that along to them. And then his expectations were shattered. Mary came to Joseph and said, I'm pregnant. Now, Joseph knew this is a problem because he knows how people get pregnant, and he knows he wasn't part of that process with her. And so he's walking through like, all right, this is not what I was thinking. This is not what I was hoping for. This is not what I was, this is not it. It's not it. And so he has a decision to make. And this is his reaction. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. I think that's interesting. He says, hey, he's got two things that are happening. He's faithful to the law. In other words, when something happens in his life, the first thing he wants to process through is, what does God say about what's happening? And I want to be faithful to that. Whatever it is I'm going to face, I want to know, hey, what does God say about this? And then I want to walk forward with that understanding. So what does God say about this? And all right, let me figure out what's next for me here, Now, the second thing we're dealing with, though, is some tension that exists in him that says, you know what, the law says one thing, but I know that if I follow exactly the law, that it has the potential to really do some pretty big harm to Mary. And because I love her, I care for her, I'm going to do this quietly. So I'm going to follow God's expectations in terms of how I want to honor my family, how I want to honor this commitment, because obviously she has done something that has not honored this commitment. But I'm going to do it quietly. I don't want to expose her to public disgrace, is the words that are used. And so that's what he decides to do. And so Joseph sets off to make that happen. Now, what's interesting to me here is the phrase, he wants to divorce her quietly. When's the last time y'all heard about a quiet divorce? I think the first question that I want to ask is, what does this tell us about the kind of man that Joseph is? When I process what he's walking through, it makes me realize that I have a pretty good bit of growth left before me as a husband and as a father. That he's got some things figured out that I don't quite have figured out yet. And then we get to dream number one. Joseph has a dream. He lays his head on his pillow at night, and while he's asleep, he has a dream, and there's an angel in it. And the angel says, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit," or the Spirit of God. And he wakes up from the dream and says, "Well, I guess I'll keep her." And so that's what he does. You know, like the dream just says, stay. Just don't go, stay. I want you to stay. Stay in this. Stay committed. Stay. Like, I want you to stay. Now, I would think that would be like this culminating moment of faith where Joseph's got these expectations are shattered, but then he hears from God and he says, okay, all right, there's 478 other people in this town, God. None of them are going to understand why or how or what I'm doing. But you know what? I'm going to trust you because my whole life up until now, I've processed all the things with whatever's coming at me, what do you want? And so now you're saying you want me to do this completely different than what I anticipated. I'm going to trust you. I would think that would be like the most like mountaintop faith experience. 478 people are like, Joseph's going to stay? Like they're still trying to figure out who the daddy is. Like who you see Mary with? You know what I'm saying? Whose boots has a boot? Whose bed has a boots been under? You know what I'm saying? That's what they're thinking. And Joseph's just like, I'm just going to stay. But then, Quirinius, governor of Syria, decides, you know what? It's time to count everyone. So, and to do this, I would like for all of you to return to your ancestral home. And so Mary at the time is 9-ish months pregnant. And so Joseph has to go to Bethlehem, which is not close to Nazareth. And so he picks up his little family, which is just him and her and the baby that's due any day, and begins the donkey walk or the trot, or I'm not sure how he got there. Maybe he just piggybacked. I don't know. They get there, and while they're there, the Bible tells us it came time for her to give birth to her firstborn, a son. Now, when you got to think, let's process this. Expectations, perfect Jewish family, incredibly devout, that is shattered. He has a dream, decides to stay, and he's like, all right, I got my life back together. I know the 478 people in our small town don't understand, but I understand because I had a dream when I was asleep at one night, and I'm going to trust God. Me and Mary, we're in this, ride or die. Here we go. We got our life together. It's going to be tough in this small town, but we're going to push forward. And all of a sudden, census. Shoot, now I got to pay Rome some money. But first I got to be counted so that I feel valuable, or so they find me valuable enough to give them money. So I got to go all the way over. She's a lot of pregnant. I'm not leaving her here to have the kid by herself, because what happens when you leave a single mom and 478 people who all think she's someone else's baby daddy kind of thing? You don't leave her by herself. You got to take her with you. And so now you're traipsing across the desert. You get to Bethlehem so that you can be counted. And then you have the baby, and it says there's not even a place for her to stay in like a house. And so she takes this baby and she puts him in a manger. Talk about Christmas expectations that are completely shattered. Like even post dream number one, it's like, all right, I got this. And Joseph's thinking, he's a carpenter. He probably had like a cute little crib that would be great on Instagram and Pinterest right now. You know what I'm saying? Like it probably was hand woven, all these things. He's like, Quirinius, you're killing me. I can't drag this across the desert. And so now he's in a feed trough. His little baby boy that he's taking a step of faith on, sitting there in a feed trough. Expectations. Now, looking back on it, we can see he made a good decision. And mostly because of this incredible vision statement that we get that summarizes this piece and part of Joseph's life. I mean, it's gorgeous. I'm going to read it to you. And when I read it to you, I'm like, okay, now it makes sense. Like, okay, this whole thing now is starting to come together. Matthew 1:22, it says this. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. It's like, okay. All right, Joseph. Now we got this vision statement. We got this incredible summary of why all of these things just happened. And it's phenomenal. It's amazing. It's incredible. He says, hey, here's the deal. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. They will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. Not God likes us. Not God's thinking about us. Not God has kind of got a little favor towards us. No, literally God with us. Like, that's pretty big. On top of that, he says all this happened to fulfill what the prophet said. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. The prophet is Isaiah, chapter 7, verse 14. Isaiah lived 700 years before Joseph. Now think about this. Joseph's expectations for his family life, for the birth of this son that he is now going to take some ownership of, shattered. But guess whose expectations are fulfilled? The rest of the Jewish world. For 700 years, their expectation was that a Messiah, a Savior, an anointed one, a prophet, priest, and king, all at the same time, would be born of a virgin in a town called Bethlehem. Joseph's shattered expectations becomes the most incredible defining moment of God meeting our expectations. 700 years. And all of a sudden it's like, Joseph, way to take one for the team. Like, that was good. Thank you, Joseph. This was good. So you think through those two big moments. Okay, I got a kid. I know it ain't yours. It's nobody else in this village. It's God's. Sure it is, Mary. Oh, never mind, I had a dream. You're right. We settled that. Oh, by the way, we got to be counted. We got to go to Bethlehem. We get there, a baby in a manger. That's now been settled. We've made it through both of those enormous issues. Then there's a king. His name's Herod. Herod was appointed by the Romans to be in charge of this little particular area. The king of the Jews, Herod, at the time, Herod, while he sits connected to the Jewish people, he's not someone that was sitting in anticipation for 700 years waiting on this birth. Though someone tells him, a group of guys from, we believe, Persia, shows up And they say, hey, we're following a star in the sky that tells us someone significant, like a royal birth has occurred, a king of the Jews. And so they tell this to the current king of the Jews. And he's like, hold on, this is no good. Now, the reason that Herod is so insecure is because he knows that the people of God, the greatest kings, were not appointed by foreign governments. The greatest kings were appointed by God himself. And so when a king shows up, he already knows, like, okay, well, I mean, I was hoping this was going to last a little longer, but for sure, I feel like I'm due. Like, I told Rome I would do whatever they wanted me to, so I should still be in power. He's insecure. His response to this is he finds out the city that Jesus is born in, and he orders every single child 2 years and under to be slaughtered. He says, kill them all. Not just in Bethlehem, even the surrounding areas. All the toddlers, all of the infants, kill them all. And that's where we get to dream 2. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said. Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. Egypt? What? Egypt? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Let's just say tonight, for those fellas, for those of you who are a little spontaneous, like I can be, I enjoy spontaneity, who are also married to someone who's not very spontaneous, whose first thing is like, hold on, I got questions. You know what I'm saying? Let's just pretend, let's try it. Tonight, in the middle of the night, you set an alarm, like let's just say like 2:46 a.m., and I want that alarm to go off, and I want you to roll over to your wife, and I want you to say, hey, honey, we got to get up right now. We are going to Egypt. Let's just see what happens, because that's what it says. It says, so he got up. Like, he didn't wait. He was like, all right, well, first, let's let the sun come up. No, he said he got up. He goes over to Mary and says, hey, honey. She's like, what? And I said, we got to get up. Is the sun? No, sun's not up. No. Is the baby up? No, baby's not up. Why are you waking me up? You know what I'm saying? Those are only 2 possible reasons. Because you ain't getting none. You know what I'm saying? We ain't doing that right now. It's 2:36 in the morning. And he says, no, honey, I don't want anything from you. We need to go to Egypt. We need to go to Egypt. And I looked at my phone on the Delta app, and United Arab Emirates has got a plane going out here at 6 a.m. We got to get to Hartsfield. Let's go. You know, like that's what's happening. You know, Egypt. Y'all know, I know geography is not our strong suit. You know, we're not teaching that in public schools all that well. My daughter sometimes still thinks Texas is a country. But, sorry, Hadley, I shouldn't have said that. Right. You know what I'm saying? But here's the deal. For those of you who are not aware, Jerusalem, Israel, is on another continent from Egypt, right? It's a different continent. And so Joseph's like, God, can you just send us like to another small town? And he's like, no, go to Egypt. Egypt. So this is what Joseph did. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and he left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Once again, Joseph's expectations are shattered. But whose expectations are fulfilled? Hosea was a contemporary of Isaiah, the prophet that we just spoke about in the first summary statement. Hosea and Isaiah on the planet at the same time, doing ministry at the same time, both 700 years prior to Jesus. And Hosea says, out of Egypt, I called my son, prophesying this moment, 700 years in the future. And so now Joseph and Mary and Jesus have gone from Nazareth to Bethlehem and now to Egypt. dream 3. At this time, I think Mary would say, Joseph, stop going to sleep. Can you take one of them gummies that just puts you all the way to sleep? You know what I'm saying? Like, no, the no dreaming gummies, you know? Dream 3. As Herod's dead, you can return to Israel. So he does. Dream 4 is very close to dream 3. We pick up in Matthew 2. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. And so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. And so Joseph has a dream, go back to Israel. You're good. You can leave Egypt. So he starts going. But then he hears Archelaus is now king. Where Herod was king, Archelaus is king. Archelaus is the son of Herod. Now here's the thing. I don't have time to go into it at the moment. We'll be here for a while. But if you want some entertainment, and well, if your entertainment style is gruesome and gory and just terrible human beings, if that's like, hey, I can read about that. If that's you, just Google Archelaus and what he did. He was absolutely horrendous. Like you think that Herod was bad, slaughtering the 2-year-olds. Archelaus just takes it to another level. And so you can go look up him. He's a historical figure. You can take it not even from a biblical standpoint, like outside of biblical history. There's plenty of sources that tell you how bad a dude he was. And so Joseph here is like, well, Archelaus is not any better than his dad. And so he has dream 4 that says, hey, you know what? Let's get specific. Don't go there. Let's not go to Jerusalem. Let's not do that. And so he goes back to where he started in Nazareth. Back to the 478 people. Now, they've added Jesus. It's 481, you know, of 60 acres. Can you imagine what it was like for them to walk back into that town? Surely rumors had already been flying, right? Rumors were flying. Well, of course, Joseph and Mary didn't come back, you know. Of course, Joseph's not going to show his face around here. He ran off with that girl who doesn't even know who the daddy is, you know. He's not. Of course not. And all of a sudden, Joseph and Mary, a little toddling Jesus comes walking back in. Can you imagine the whispers like, oh, that's Joseph. I mean, that boy is cute. That can't be Joseph, you know. Let me give you a summary. He had a perfect family, perfect marriage, perfect proposal. Everything was going just the way he wanted it. And boom, expectations shattered. And in a small town, there's no coming back from that. She's having someone else's kid. We're going to get a divorce. And then he has a dream that says stay. How does he explain the dream to the 478 people that are criticizing him? You don't tell, I had a dream. At this time, just to make sure we're all in, God had not been speaking to the people of God for 400 years. And so to say, hey, you know what? God spoke to me, the carpenter in the tiniest town in all of Galilee. I had a dream. He told me exactly what was happening. By the way, he's sending his son to my family. Thank you very much. Like no one's buying that. Then all of a sudden, he figures out a way to cope with that. Fast forward, he's got to take his pregnant wife across the desert to another city to be counted. Doesn't get to put the kid in the crib that he had made for him. Instead, it's in a feed trough. And he settles that, and before you know it, though, the king hears about this tiny podunk carpenter and his little girlfriend, now wife, and this baby from 3 randos from Persia with a bunch of gifts and fancy clothes. And all of a sudden, he's running for his life because they're going to kill all the kids. And so he ends up in Egypt of all places. Can you imagine going from one of the smallest towns and never leaving to a completely different country to live? And he figures that out, and finally he can go home. All right, let's go home. We're not going back to Nazareth, though. Well, the Archelaus, he's worse than his dad. He ends up back in the small town. Nobody had forgotten. Nobody forgot what they had seen just a couple years ago when Mary and Joseph conveniently had to go to Bethlehem to get counted for taxes and didn't come back. Nobody forgot. No, the truth is, folks, sometimes Christmas is hard. Sometimes Christmas is hard. We don't want it to be. We didn't sign up for it to be. We're not dreaming it would be. We're not praying it will be. Reality is just sometimes Christmas is hard. Commercials won't tell us it's going to be hard, but it's going to be hard. Our family values not going to tell us it's going to be hard, but it's going to be hard. Some of you are going to experience Christmas this year for the first time without somebody. Sometimes Christmas is hard. I remember my first Christmas without my grandmother. I get my love for Christmas from her. Her name's Joyce. She was a Christmas decorating aholic. She bought so many Christmas things. She had two things she would spend money on, other than grandkids. So grandkids are given. And two other things she'd buy for herself. Anything with an apple on it. I don't know. Just apples everywhere. And Christmas. And so this is the way it would work. We'd go over after Thanksgiving. And there's 4 boys plus the 2 dads, my dad and my uncle. So there's 6 of us. And we would climb up into the attic, pull that thing down, you know what I'm talking about, crack up the crickety stairs. We go up into the attic. And it'd take us about an hour and a half to get all of the boxes out for Christmas. Hour and a half, that's right. Assembly line and everything, working hard. We're sweating. You know what I'm talking about? All the boxes are down. We would then close up the attic, and the entire back hall would be filled. You couldn't go out the back door because all the boxes were full. Like they're full of stuff. And then we would leave them. She didn't want help unpacking the boxes. That was her thing. And so she would then go through. She had so much Christmas stuff, she didn't use it all every year. No. She had new stuff she was going to add to some of the old stuff, and then she would put it out. And so she would let us know, hey, by the way, fellas, I'm done choosing what we're putting out for Christmas. It's all out. I need you to come put the boxes of the stuff back up in the attic. And so we'd come back over and we would load all the stuff back up in the attic. The empty boxes of what she used, the new stuff she had hiding somewhere else, and then all the stuff she didn't use from previous years that didn't match her little feng shui this year. And we put it all back up in the attic. And then we would do Christmas, and when we were done with Christmas that day, we would pull all the boxes down. We would fill up the hallway of empty boxes again. And then we would go away, she would fill all the boxes, and she would call us and say, hey, I'm ready for the stuff to go back up in the attic. And so we would go all back over again. This is 4 times a year, you know what I'm talking about? And we'd take all the boxes, we would put them all back up in the attic, and we would arrange them ever so nice and neatly, right? That's what we would do. I remember, I don't know what all I bought my grandmother. I don't remember. I remember just one thing. No, I remember 2 things. But one thing in particular. I got her a picture, a painting of Santa Claus. And Santa Claus it's not a traditional Santa Claus. It's Santa Claus is holding this wooden staff, and he's got this incredible white beard. But not like a fluffy white beard, like this, I'll freaking own you if you touch me wrong beard. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just got this cool beard. It's not a red jacket, but it's this yellow, like mustard colored jacket, and he's got these incredible boots on, and he's standing in the middle of these huge trees, and then snow's on the ground. He's got this glare like, I know I'm good looking. You know what I'm saying? Like yeah, the years just make me better. You know what I'm saying? And it's just Santa Claus just standing there, and she would hang it up every single Christmas. And when she passed away, I asked my dad, I said, hey, is there any chance I could have that picture? And thankfully, he was like, yeah, you can come get the picture. So that picture hangs in my house. And every time I look at it, I think about her. And she's been gone for a few years now. And so the pain that I feel missing her is not what some of you are feeling, because some of you are walking through just fresh loss. You know, I've had a few to process that, right? I mean, the way I grew up, I was with her. I mean, her and my granddad basically raised me in enormous sections of my life. Just huge pieces, you know. I lived with her for a long time. So I've been processing that, but I know some of you, this is going to be your first Christmas to start processing. So while I don't feel exactly what you're feeling. I've been there though. I know sometimes Christmas is really hard. I know some of you have been through a really difficult relationship battle this year, and you lost. And so you're going to wrestle with Christmas without your kids the whole time. I'm so sorry for you. Sometimes Christmas is really hard. The important thing, though, is that in the midst of your tears, you don't allow that to blur the significance of Jesus in your life. Here is the key for Joseph. Before any of the hard times ever hit, Joseph had already decided that God knows best. Before any of the shattered expectations occurred, Joseph had already made a decision. This is the way I'm going to live my life. I've got expectations, and when the world shatters them, I'm still going to make a conscious decision to say, you know what? God, you know best. You know best. Now, with this, it brings us to a little bit of theological tension. And that tension is this: if we believe that God knows best, then we've got to wrestle with a couple of things. The first thing we've got to wrestle with is that God caused Mary to become pregnant, which is the first way that it shattered his expectations. God was the orchestrator of that. God's the one that put Joseph in that awkward situation. God's the one that brought the two of them together, and then, okay, she's pregnant. It's not yours, it's mine. This was a miracle, a miraculous, supernatural moment, and I know this is going to shatter your family expectations. God caused that. That's difficult for us to wrestle with. Now, on the other hand, we also have Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem and a king, murderous Herod, who's killing innocent children. God did not cause that, but he did allow it. But Joseph's response, regardless of whether it was something God caused or God allowed, was the same, because he decided before both of those things happened, no matter what, God knows best. Now, when things happen in our life that are difficult, there's usually one of two responses for people who believe there's a God. The first is the most immediate and normal response. The second response is a more mature response, and it usually takes us some time to grow into. The first response is this: why? Why, God? Why? Like, if we knew why, that would help. Probably won't. But we think it might. Like, okay. But the truth is, oftentimes our why is it's a way for us to delay dealing with the reality. Like, this is what's happened. This is where we're at. I'd rather go ahead and engage you in a conversation, God. That way I don't have to look down and actually see what's happening in my life. And so I want to know why. And when you won't give me a satisfactory answer, I'm going to continue to be mad at you. And I really don't want to deal with what's happening because you refuse to tell me why. So not only am I going to say you don't exist, or you don't care, or you're not interested, I'm also going to walk through this without any of your guidance, because why would I? You won't even answer my why. That's the typical way we can respond that way. The second way, which requires an enormous amount of maturity and discipline, is this: okay, God, what do I do now? So now what do I do? Like, I had these expectations. Think about it, Joseph's perspective. God, I did what you wanted me to do with my family. I honored you in terms of how I entered into a relationship. I honored you with my relationship. I honored you with my marriage. I honored you with our customs and our traditions and our religious values. I honored you in all of those things. And then this happens. And so he could say, why? Or he could say, all right, well, so what do you want me to do now? And don't confuse my frustration with disobedience, because I'm going to do it. Just tell me what you want me to do. And the truth is, it's because of that reality, that ability that each one of us have to make a decision before our circumstances are shattered, that God knows best, that helps us endure all of those moments that are probably awaiting us at some point or place in our life. You see, Joseph's mind when those things started happening was, what does the Bible teach me? What do I know to be true about God? That's it. That his ways are higher than my ways. That his thoughts are higher than my thoughts, declares the Lord. Just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so your ways are higher than my ways. In other words, I want to know why, but I realize that my why getting answer probably won't help me in what I actually need to ask, which is, so what do you want me to do now? Just tell me what to do next. And that's why this is a true statement. Jesus is hope for the hard times. He's hope for the hard times. And that's what Christmas is, isn't it? I mean, I know we've built Christmas into something else. Like we've got great commercials and ribbons and bows on new cars and like we've got this picture of family gatherings and perfect tables and then turkey. We just did turkey, but we got turkey, or maybe it's ham this time. Who knows? We got these things. We got Christmas. We got gifts and we got paper and we got perfectly little stretched seams and tied bows and ribbons and all the things. And we got Christmas. But that's not really what Christmas is. Christmas actually is hope for the hard times. Because think about it. There's some shepherds hanging out in a field watching over their flocks at night. And behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. And they were terrified. But the angel looks at them and says, hey, no. I bring you tidings of great joy that will be for all people, for today to you is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And you want to tell you something? You can go find him. I'll tell you how you can find him. You will find this little baby wrapped in cloths, and he's laying in an animal feed trough. You can find him. That is Christmas. Did you pick up the most important part? It's week 1 of this series. That it's joy for all the people. And all the people also means the people that are in the middle of hard times. You see, we can't allow our shattered circumstances to rob us of our joy. It will certainly suck the life out of our happiness, but our joy and our happiness are not tied together, even though the world wants to tell us it is. We don't need permission from any circumstance to have joy in our life. We don't need its permission because it's been given to us as a gift through Jesus Christ himself, who started in a manger, middle of the place, ended on a cross, and at some point comes to receive us all unto himself. Hope for the hard times. I've given you a couple of really great vision and summary statements. Both of them are pulling from 700 years in advance, Hosea, Isaiah, that frame these shattered expectations in a way that just brings beauty out of a life that just seems like it's unraveling, from Nazareth to Bethlehem to murder to scandal to Egypt and back again to back to the small town. Just like, man, what is life? This is chaos. And these summary statements from 700 years prior bring so much clarity to this is why this makes sense. I want to end with one more summary statement. But for this one, we don't go backwards 700 years from Christmas 1. We go forward about 30 years. Now, what's significant about this one is that it's tied directly to the journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem to Egypt, back to Nazareth. And all of the things that Joseph went through, except for this time, Joseph isn't around to hear it. Joseph's gone. He passed away. So he doesn't even get to hear or see the fruit of his obedience in the midst of his broken and shattered circumstances. He didn't get to see it. Jesus is just starting his ministry. And he starts recruiting what we know today in the church circle as the 12 apostles. They would become some of his closest friends. And this is right at the very beginning of this. And so he's inviting these guys to come and follow him. And this is what one of those guys, his name is John, records about how Jesus collected them. This is what he says. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, and this is the important part, right? Here's the vision statement. Here it comes. "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Here's the best part. Nathanael looks back at him and says, "Nazareth? 60-acre, 481 people Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. And Philip has the greatest response. Come and see. Come and see. That is the invitation for you this morning. Maybe you're asking the same thing. Is it true what we read? Is that true about Jesus? Is Jesus who the Bible says he is? Maybe you're asking that same question. Can anything good come from a small town, 60-acre, 481 population, Nazareth? I would use the same words as Philip. Come and see. There's some of you that have been wrestling this year, the last couple of months, with what's your next spiritual step. And for some of you, it'll be a first spiritual step. Christmas is a really great time to take spiritual steps. Joseph shows us that pretty clearly. And so for some of you, it's time. For some of you, it's time to step forward and to lay claim to what you are beginning to believe about Jesus and his significance, that he is the Son of God who has come to take away the sins of the world. And it's time for you to make that decision. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to talk about it a lot. And we want to make it super simple for you to take that step and begin that journey. There's a number we'll throw on the screen. You can just simply text the word "begin," and we'll start the conversation through text message. That can graduate to an in-person conversation or a phone call. We're going to have the baptistry. It's here available today. We can make it available next week if you would like. No matter what happens, it will be available on Christmas Eve at both the 3 o'clock and the 5 o'clock. Because I believe that not only is Christmas a season for hope, I also believe that Christmas is a season for movement. And there are many of you that have been wrestling with what's the next move. It's time. If you forget the number, it's easy. Maybe you will wake up Tuesday night at 2:36 because you had a dream. And you will say, "I would do it, but I don't know the number." And then you'll remember me telling you this. You get on this little Google machine and you just type in our church, and the number that comes up is the number on the screen. So just text the number. And maybe you'll say, well, I don't even remember the word. I don't remember the special word. You text whatever word you want to. I forgot the word. We'll know what word you were talking about. And at 2:46 in the morning, you can send that text. And about 5.5 hours later, I'll read it. But it's time for some of you to do something about it. The kingdom of God is waiting for you to engage. Because the truth is, Christmas is hard sometimes. And in the midst of those really difficult Christmases, the greatest gift we have is each other, engaged in kingdom living and kingdom purpose. Because our job is to surround people in those difficult moments and to be there as they walk through it. Jesus, hope for hard times.